undue scrutiny and surveillance. And I think this was a factor that, for some of the guys that led student organizations, fraternities, things of that nature, where they had the greatest problems. Because they were like, you know, we have a party in the student center, and the police are like, and he used the term thick up in the party. You know, there's a lot of them. But when I go to events for the white fraternities, I don't see all these police around. And I go to these events. So there seems to be this sense that African American men, at least amongst the juniors and seniors in this study, that are in student organizations, that there's a double standard. There is one student here, and his case, he doesn't have a case, but he has an issue with university police where he has an officer, he's a graduate student. And apparently the student security person at the front desk of his building asked for his ID one day after not asking for it for like weeks, months. So he said, no, you know who I am. I'm here every other day, and you see me. So he didn't give him his ID. He went up to his office. This student called WSUPD, called the police. The police came, asked him for his ID in his office. He showed them his ID. He showed them his driver's license. He showed them everything that they needed to know to establish that he had a rightful presence in that space and in that building. They challenged him on his out-of-state driver's license. Why do you have an out-of-state driver's license? Which was totally immaterial. Then they escorted him out of the building.
We really should have asked for an audience with the director. He's Afro-American, whom I know personally, who's a reasonable man, and I think he would discipline that person.
So
that's uncalled. That really goes too far.
A question regarding the samples, the subject that you sampled. These were 10 men who were actually graduates, correct?
No, not graduates.
They're the ones that didn't graduate.
They are undergraduates, current undergraduates.
Okay, they're undergrad, right? They're currently enrolled students.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And so, have there been any interviews with some of the men who were enrolled who had not graduated? Have you done any interviews with persons who were Wayne State students previously, but still haven't, you know, they're not currently registered students enrolled and have maybe been out of school for a while, to get their perspective as to why they haven't completed?
No.
Okay.
The scope of this study doesn't speak to those that have withdrawn.
Okay. And I was only asking that because, you know, maybe we could get some other information as to why they've chosen not to finish, or maybe, you know, what circumstances may be predicating them not completing, and kind of have, you know, that perspective also. Do you think that would be helpful, or?
Well, I think so. And I thought about the financial end of it. But for the scope of this study, I decided not to include the financial end of it, because that puts the onus back on factors that we can't control as an institution. You know, I think as an institution, you know, we may not be able to determine how much aid a person gets or whether or not he has enough money to go to school. But what we can do is to focus on our environmental or our climate issues. And so that's why I limited the scope of my study to environment and climate. Yes?
Yeah, in the classes I teach, I've had minorities, particularly African American students, minority students in general, that talk about just the relief that they feel to sit in a classroom with someone who looks like them, or a person of color, because they feel a certain indifference or whatever. And I said every white person they encounter in front of the classroom shows them this, but there's a general sense of not feeling fully accepted or whatever, but feeling, you know, wanting to see more of that representation themselves in the front of the classroom. I think that has an alienating effect on many minorities that are, you know, interviewed.
I would agree. One of the subjects that I spoke with spoke about how if he's with another student, because he's in a support role here at the university, and he works with students, if some of the faculty in his department will challenge that person if he's not there, because they assume that student doesn't belong. Then, when he comes, and he joins them, then all of a sudden those people's attitudes toward that student change. Oh, he's with you. In other words, you're with an acceptable person that we know, so therefore he's all right. In other words, he's not all right by himself being in that environment, but he's all right if he's with a person that the faculty member finds acceptable, which I thought was interesting as well. Because regardless, until you actually know an individual, you know, or have a sense as to who they are, and if they're not presenting any harm and or danger, why question them in the first place? And that's what the student told me. He was like, I wonder if I hadn't been there, would that situation have gone about differently? Because there are some young men that if you challenge them, they're going to step up to the plate. And they're not going to lose face in front of anybody. They don't care who you are. So the question becomes, how do you deal with people, one that you don't know? But I think it's an issue of not only sensitivity, but treating people like you want to be treated in a very real sense. Any other questions or concerns or thoughts?
Just one other point. You just said that, earlier you said this disconnection and people saying resources are hidden. What you just said, if someone has a person that is, quote, acceptable that they're linked to, they treat you very differently, you know. They're more receptive towards you. Even getting research opportunities, you know, it's knowing the right people. In Detroit, which is like 80% African American, and, you know, there's so much racial segregation in the state, residential patterns, but resource-wise and who you work with and the importance of networking. So I can see how these minority students feel like, you know, the resources are hidden because they haven't had those connections, and people haven't extended themselves to them, mentored them or whatever. Yeah, you feel like you're out there all by yourself, totally isolated.
And when the guys mentioned, they talk about support systems, they talk about mentoring and having someone whom they felt could lead and guide them to resources, but also to you know, help them along the way. Show them where things were, connect them to the right people. But I think that's more or less related to size of the institution as well, where as an institution I think we need to break it down so that students experience smaller and smaller environments, and learning communities are a part of that. My limitations, small number of interview subjects, my familiarity with the campus environment, and the volunteer sample, because sometimes, you know, I didn't have anybody refuse me right away, which I thought was interesting. But by and large, there's still a volunteer sample. And these are some of the support programs that we have at Wayne State right now that I know that focus on the needs of African American students. But they're very small, primarily serve as, they're grant funded by and large, either through the state and or Student African American Brotherhood is a department, is a student organization that I advise here at the university. So I have some familiarity with the issues. However, none of the guys that I talked to are a member of SOB, or Student African American Brotherhood. I specifically left them out because I do advise that group.
Is there some kind of way that identifying, entering Afro-American students, whether they transfer or otherwise, can be apprised of that organization and invited to join it? Because it seems to me, just for information purposes, given the size of the institution and the feeling that one feels lost, which is not just Afro-American students, but I think it's more acute, that somehow if they're apprised of that, and then hopefully they would take membership, because that's where you can get the information. I mean, that's part of the secret of success, is networking and sources of information. So I don't know, but I don't know whether admissions would break it down that way and allow you just to have access to that, and maybe that organization could be an engine for the kind of thing you advocate.
Well, I think it's doable. The question becomes, because this past fall in SOB, we had a surge in membership from new guys coming to the university. And what we found was that we couldn't handle it.
Well, I would think, I would volunteer, and I think we could get Ron Brown if we could get Afro-American faculty, males involved.